A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
As the battle for the hearts and minds of our children rages in the Western world today with so much distraction from devices, phones and social media applications, it's good to see Christians on that front line producing material to connect to children. And I'm joined by one such man today. He's an author who's written 2 books aimed at children. The first one is called Sophie, Simpleton, and the second one is called Simply Sophie, Simpleton. And author P.G. James joins me in the studio now. P.G. James, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. It's lovely to be here. Appreciate the time.
And I will call you Peter because that's your real name, but P.G. James is a funky name.
There's only one of them in the world.
Well, there you go.
As far as Google is concerned.
So tell us why you changed your name to P.G. James when you authored these books.
Look, I've self-published non-fiction books in the past and done quite well. I've sold multiple copies of those products both in the UK and Australia. But 5 years ago, I was stricken with lymphoma. And when something like that happens in your life, you sort of take a closer look at your life. And I decided to restructure my whole operation. I'm in business with my daughter, but she was in a management level in that business. So I decided I would offer her the opportunity to buy half the business. And then that would then free me up to do what I believed I still had undone in my life, as much time as I had. And so I decided to take myself back to school and learn how to write fiction. And as a result of that, I've always signed up to business coaches in the past. So I thought, well, this is no different. I'm going to find myself a coach who'll teach me how to write fiction. And I was very fortunate to find an online teaching program. And my coach ended up being Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, wow.
So he wrote thrillers, and I thought, yeah, well, I love thrillers because in the Bible, that's all I've ever read. You know, David and Goliath, it's full of thrillers.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, that's what I watch, that's what I like to write. And so I embarked upon writing 2 thrillers. The first one was set in Iraq, and the second was set in Israel. And during that time, I was told by my hematologist that there was nothing more he could do for me, that I was probably going to die of something else rather than lymphoma. And I thought, was that going to be a car crash or what? You know?
Yeah, he's a prophet.
So, yeah. So I actually decided to sack him. I thought he's not going to do me any good. And I really decided it's about time I get back to Dr. Jesus and put my case before him. I'd sort of let him slip in that area of my life. And so I just got on with living and I kept writing. And that was my position for the last 5 years. But
okay, well, let's stop there because you said that you felt there was still something undone. Does that mean that years and years ago you felt a desire to write a book but you just never got around to it?
I've always had that seed desire in my heart. My background with writing began with writing lyrics for songs. That's in my teenage years. And then I wrote poetry, and I never felt that I was really good at it. But an opportunity came up in my late 20s where I identified a market that I felt I could write books and sell substantial quantities. And it was in the business market because I was in business for myself at that stage. And the first book that I wrote, I gave it to my wife and she hated it. So that night I didn't sleep and I wrote the next book. And that book secured my first sale and it did very, very well. As a result of that. So I continued to write.
Hang on, did your wife like the second book?
She loved the second book.
She's a good critic.
She knew exactly right. So the first book went in the bin.
Yeah.
But you know, when you get rejected, you don't lay down and die. You just say there must be another way. And so that's what I did, and that's what I've learned in business. You know, you go through the valleys, you go through the mountains, but you just press on. The Bible says the steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. So the most important thing that we all do is we just keep stepping. And while we're going along, that we make sure we get the right instructions. And so as I was on my journey, this latest journey of writing these books, I woke up one morning and my spleen, which is on the left side of my body, was the size of a football. And I actually had to ask my wife, I said, what part of the body is that? And so we Googled it and we found my spleen is exploding.
Wow.
And so here I am again in another hematologist's office, and she has taken a X-ray of my body, and it's lit up like a Christmas tree with disease.
Yeah.
And so this was when I was in the middle of writing the thrillers. And so she said, you're going to have 8 doses of chemo coming up over the next 6 months. And I said, well, before I do that, I need to first check in with my physician, Dr. Jesus.
Yeah.
And I did pray about it right there in her office. And I just sensed that the Lord prompted me that I should follow her directives and just do what she said. And to have chemo in my body was totally against everything that I'd ever done before. I'd never really liked doctors in that sense.
Yeah.
And so on the journey of that, I had experienced 3 of these, infusions of what she called poison. This was my hematologist saying. And in the midst of that, after those 3, I'm at home in the middle of the night, and I had to relieve myself in the bathroom. And as I was having an experience, something happened, and it was just like a whoosh went through my entire body. And as I was experiencing this thing, I sensed the voice of the Holy Spirit just say to me, the healing oil of Gilead has just flowed through your entire body and you're completely healed.
Man.
I went back to bed. I got up at 4 a.m. I wrote a cancellation email to my hematologist, said stop all further treatments, and I'm willing to be subject to any tests that you give me to see if I'm mad or not. Well, I went through the same procedure of all the scans, PET scans, etc., x-rays. And when I went into her office the next time, which was only within a week or so from that event, she pulled up the screen that had been lit up like a Christmas screen before, and it was completely clear.
Amazing.
And I've continued to walk this walk.
How many years ago was that now, Peter?
This was only in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so in that whole drama of my life experience, I just had this sense that I needed to begin to change tack as a writer. And I'd always had a secret desire to write something for children. Ages 8 to 12, I wasn't a picture book guy. I still wanted to write a novel.
Yep.
And so I invented this character, Sophie Simpleton. The name says it all. And the first book is The Unextraordinary Life of Sophie Simpleton. And I wanted to, as the author, take her from someone who everybody sees as unextraordinary. And she did look unextraordinary. If you look at the front cover of the book, she's got a patch over one eye. If you looked at her hands, they're actually full of warts. So she's not the most likable character. But through the...
She's a ranger. She's got red hair as well.
She's got red hair as well. So she's in trouble. And
they're a persecuted minority, rangers, aren't they?
They are. And they are bullied.
They are.
And bullies feature very much in my books. But the wonderful thing about Sophie is that she's on a journey to meet the man of light. She's had some connection with Jesus through her family. She went to Sunday school because it's set in the 1970s. I thought, I don't want to set it in today with all the devices and that. Let's go back to the 70s because I was around in the 70s.
Yep.
And let's get the drags to bikes out again.
Yep.
Let's get the gay time ice cream,
When a gay time was just an ice cream.
When it was just an ice cream, not a name.
That's right.
And get the roller skates out. And I decided to set her on a mountain because I live up on Tamborine Mountain. It's a mountain that overlooks an ocean. And so we go through all her adventures and her challenges of overcoming this unextraordinariness, if that's such a word.
Yeah.
And by the end of the book, she's extraordinary. And I believe it's just telling us what Jesus sees about each and every one of us, and even the listeners who are listening right now, that he sees something extraordinarily special in each of us, and he wants to bring that out in us.
Well, hang on. I need to ask, because most of our listeners are adults, and hopefully they're going to buy this for their kids, so you're not spoiling it for the kids. How does she become extraordinary in the end of the book? What happens?
By action. She responds to crises like none of her peers would respond. And so there is a sense of courage, and she's been prepared for this because she's had to battle with bullies all her young life, and she's had to overcome the attacks that have come against her. And so it's actually created within her inner strength that it's by only the last few chapters that we see that inner strength actually come out in physical actions where she actually saves the life of her biggest bully. And as a result, and this is the wonderful thing about Sophie Simpleton, she's learned how to forgive. And that big bully actually becomes one of her best friends in the sequel that follows. And then she also has the input, because she doesn't have many friends. Her main friends are actually the wildlife that lives on the mountain. And so, because I live on Tamborine Mountain, I have birds all around me. And so she explores the wildlife and introduces the readers to all this wildlife that we have in Australia. And that's why I love it, going to an international audience as well. But she
Well, hang on. Let's stop there. So when you say it's going into an international audience, explain to our listeners, what does that mean?
All right. I have published this through a company called Ark House Press. They've been around for 21 years. And the very day that this book was launched, both as a hard copy and as an ebook, I had people purchasing it over in Nashville, Tennessee. It was just so wonderful.
Great.
And they're reading it. And so it's
available. You got some feedback from a kid in Nashville too, didn't you?
I did. His daughter, he said this. He was smiling about getting the book himself from Amazon, and it arrived quickly in just a couple of days from over there. But the daughter, she responded, she said, I believe Sophie Simpleton and I would get on marvellously, you know. And so she really identified with this Sophie Simpleton and how she could really relate to her. And that was my heart's desire.
Yeah.
You know, people might say, well, this is a book about a girl that's written by a bloke. But I've got young men who are reading this book right now because throughout the whole book, there are a number of different characters that I introduce. There are older people who Sophie sidles up and they become her mentors. And, you know, I've had mentors all my life and I know the importance of having those. And so they impact her and lift her up and they look beyond the facade of her outward appearance, which everybody saw as unextraordinary. And they start to pull out the extraordinary in Sophie so that she can begin to believe it herself. And by the end of the story, it's triumphant. It's such a triumphant ending to the first book, which leads into the sequel, which will be out this Christmas.
Which is called simply Sophie Simpleton.
Yeah, I actually framed that term in the first book.
Yeah.
And I locked it away. I thought, that's a perfect title for the second book. And
Love it.
And simply Sophie Simpleton is the fact that she's come of age. She's not even 9 yet, but by the end of the sequel, she has her 9th birthday. And she invites every bully from the mountain to her party. She invites everybody who has attacked her in the past to this party. And there's the miraculous that occurs in this particular sequel. And she has 2 staunch friends that she has. And you'll notice on the cover of the sequel, the one who is in a wheelchair is actually the bully of the first book that she saved her life.
Oh, that's nice.
And the second character is a Jewish boy that has moved into the territory and is dealing with anti-Semitism. And so Sophie has to help him overcome the attacks that come his way as well. And I thought that was very pertinent for what we're seeing across the world today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Peter, I just want to give the book a shout out. It's called Sophie Simpleton. The author is P.G. James. It was published by Ark Publishing. It's available on Amazon. And if people Google it, they'll find it in Australia as well.
Yep,
Kuron got it. And even your own granddaughter gave you a raving review, didn't she? What did she say about it?
Well, I made a decision that I would present it to my 12-year-old granddaughter. She's my oldest granddaughter. And I asked her that she would critique my work before it was printed. And she was very nervous about that. She mentioned to her mother, who's my daughter, can I really tell Granddad what I really think? And she said, well, that's the whole point. He wants you. And so she was very brave. And she actually critiqued certain areas that she felt I could have done better. And so she made the first book very, very much better than it was when I wrote it the first time. Then the second one, this was even more beautiful. When I got this book back, I think I got to become a little bit better of a writer because of her critique from the first one.
Yep.
I got back the contents of that book, and throughout the contents on different chapters were love hearts. And so I actually put that in front of me as I edited the second book, because of the great encouragement that she was giving me as a 12-year-old.
That's nice. Well, you're surrounded by good female critics by the sounds of it, Peter, so you're doing well, mate. But I just want to thank you for joining us today in the studio, and I want to remind our listeners the book is called Sophie Simpleton. It's got great presentation, a great cover, great graphics on the front there. It's well written. It's a great read. P.G. James is the author. P.G. James, I want to thank you for joining us on 2020 today.
Can I just add one last thing? Okay. We're running a competition right now in September. And if you go to my website, pgjames.com, you could actually sign up and possibly win one of 12 copies, signed copies from myself, which I'll mail to you anywhere in Australia. So I just want to open that up for your listeners as well.
Great. So what's the website?
pgjames.com.
Excellent. pgjames.com. Peter, I want to thank you again for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.